But I want to start with Mauricio Pochettino. The US men's national team have finally got their man, Stevie Nicol. Thoughts on the appointment?
Well, I think initially it seems like a fantastic appointment. A manager who you certainly can't question. His CV is incredible. A guy that the type of manager that since Jurgen Klinsmann probably that the US have been trying to bring to these shores. So I think right off the bat, certainly worldwide, Pochettino's recognised as one of the best coaches. So it's a huge coup, and obviously his reputation and his history with younger players, because right now the US does have a young squad, which is great, but obviously they need to be guided. And so when you've got a young squad that hasn't been guided properly, which I don't think they have, then you kind of see what happens. They're inconsistent. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. You're really not quite sure what you're getting. So Pochettino's certainly resume points towards bringing on young players and making them consistent and making them consistently good.
Mark, with this appointment, has the United States Soccer Federation got themselves out of a hole that they got themselves into by reappointing Greg Berhalter?
Yeah, I think so. I think that was a strange reappointment, especially when you consider the whole Gio Reyna stuff as a background noise to it as well. It didn't really make sense that you would retain a guy that had a poor World Cup and a guy that had issues with one of his best players. So, I think bringing in Pochettino it's a fantastic appointment. I think it shows real ambition by the US. I think he'll just raise standards. I think because he's got, real worked experience in the biggest leagues in the world, the Premier League, League and with PSG, the Champions League. He's just been to places that the majority of predecessors haven't been anywhere near, apart from Jurgen Klinsmann. The majority of his predecessors have basically been US grown coaches who, with all due respect, haven't got any real experience outside a very kind of insular goldfish bowl. And I think Pochettino comes in with different eyes, different perspective. I think he will inspire the players. He will inspire the fans. I don't really see a downside to this appointment. And I think as well, the fact that he would have been considered for the England manager's job shows you how much of a coup this is for the US, because, Pochettino was keen on the England job, but the US have come along, got the deal done, and England are still looking around for a manager.
Okay, Ryan, why the United States? Why take a salary of what we're led to believe is $6 million a year, which is around $8 million less than he was getting at Chelsea? The attraction of the US men's national team for Pochettino is what?
Well, I think in a way the US sort of lucked into this because we're in like this weird phase with club soccer where a lot of the big teams don't have as much money as they used to. A lot of the teams are now being run by hedge fund people that have sort of different objectives in mind, I guess, when building a soccer team. So you have a handful of incredibly accomplished coaches that were getting passed up in favor of people like, let's say, Vincent Kompany, someone who gets relegated from the Premier League and then gets the Bayern job, or Enzo Maresca becoming the Chelsea manager instead of Pochettino. So I think there was like a weird little sort of shifting of the landscape that I think allowed the US to capitalize on this. And so I think that plus the fact that the World Cup is in the US, and I honestly don't think that it's sort of a short-term year and a half has to turn this thing around, get the team performing at a higher level. I honestly think that probably the shorter term part of it played a role in him wanting to do it, because you do it for a year and a half. US does great. You can decide if you want to stay on. If the US does great, you're going to have plenty of club opportunities as well. So it really doesn't, it feels like a win-win, like Mark's, a win for the US and a win for Pochettino. It's a sort of upside for everyone, it feels like.
That's a really good. Sorry, Stevie.
I think you've got to look at the situation. It's kind of a perfect storm for the US, because there's no question. Trying to put yourself in Pochettino's shoes, his last two jobs, you talk about frustrating and disillusioning you about the game of football. PSG, on the face of it, seemed like a fantastic job. He gets it. Yes, he's got 3 trophies, but listen, me and Augie could get 3 trophies if we were running PSG. So But what's going on outside of the football pitch is an absolute nightmare. You know, we want to coach because we enjoy football and we enjoy football players. But when you've got all this other stuff constantly, day after day after day, and regardless of what you do, it seems like you're not doing the right thing. So you go from that to Chelsea, and then you see what happens at Chelsea again. You're trying to work with your players. That's what you want to do, but you've got all this other stuff going on that just constantly wears you down day after day. So I think the US have got him in a position where he wants something fresh, something that he can be in charge of, something he can get a hold of, and he obviously thinks that he can do something with his squad. You know, he's not just blindly said, "All right, I like this." He's obviously looked at the players. He thinks he can help them. He thinks he can certainly make the US better. And so, as Ryan said, you know, for 18 months, a couple of years, then instead of sitting in the house waiting on another job that's going to drive him crazy, I'll take this and actually I might enjoy myself.
Yeah, there's a really good piece on ESPN.com by ESPN's very own Jeff Carlisle. It's kind of the inside story into how they were able to get someone they probably initially thought, I don't think we're going to get him. It seemed like him and Klopp were the two initially, and they knew they weren't going to get Klopp, but they ended up getting Pochettino. One of the things that Jeff speaks about in the article, Mark, is 2026 and the World Cup and the expectations. And the USSF are hoping that Pochettino can lead the US to at least the quarterfinals. With the talent they have available, is that a reasonable ask for the new man?
I think it could be tough, but it all depends on the route to the final, doesn't it? And, you know, they could come out of the group and play a Brazil or an Argentina. It depends on the look of the draw. If they get a favourable draw, they could definitely ride it to the quarterfinals. But I do think at this point out from the finals, 18 months' time, it is a tall order. But I do think that the US have got home advantage. But it's too early to say, Mark. I think they can't do any worse than last time. I think there's definitely sort of the copper of this summer, I should say. I think that Pochettino will make them better. He'll get people like Pulisic and Tyler Adams, you know, playing to a different level. But it all depends on the route to the latter stage. And I think if they get a favourable route, they'll do okay. But if they get a tough route, then I think the first top team they face, they'll probably lose against, unless Pochettino can oversee an incredible turnaround of belief and confidence in the next, 18 months. So it's a tall order, that. But just back to the question about it, why he's taking it. Mm-hmm. I think people are kind of underestimating the power of the US sporting landscape. Now, the salary that he's earning may be half of what he could earn in the Premier League or in Europe. But I think if you're successful in the US, then your earning potential absolutely rockets. I think, we look at if Klopp had gone there, exactly the same. But I think Pochettino's got a real personality. He could really engage with the US public. I think if he gets this team going, playing well, and they do well at the World Cup, his earning potential off the field will be much bigger than anything he could have imagined in Europe or the UK. So there's that as well. So I think, and he's got this chance, he could be the guy that finally gets the US on course to being a proper footballing power. I'm not saying that a power of the likes of Brazil, Argentina, Germany, France, but I do think that they can climb another level to be in that second tier of teams.
Ryan, you can kind of go back 10, 11 years for a relationship between Matt Crocker, who's the USSF sporting director, and he was at Southampton. That's how he kind of got to know Pochettino. But look, we all have friends in the business, and it doesn't mean to say that you're going to get the best job or you're going to approach someone like Pochettino and he's going to come here. The interesting thing, there were many things in Jeff's article about the money, and now they've taken their commercial revenue in-house rather than give it to a third party. They're about 60 million up over the past 12 months. So the fact that they're doing this and we're able to get Pochettino, it seems to be that, they made a mess of the Berhalter stuff, but there's a lot of good things going on at the USSF, starting with the commercial revenue, allowing them to be able to afford Pochettino.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I have been very critical of U.S. soccer over the past 10, 15, 20 years. And you just take a step back and you could make a really good argument that the U.S. women's team and the U.S. men's team have the two best coaches in international soccer for both sides. You can easily make the case for Pochettino, easily make the case for Emma Hayes. And that's just a massive turnaround after Vlatko Andonovski really struggled with the women's team. They were so much better and so much more cohesive under Emma Hayes. And Berhalter, while I think we forget, like, there was genuine like pleasure with the US's performance at the last World Cup outside of people in the US. But I think hanging on to Berhalter for a term, an extra term, proved to be a mistake. And to go from those two coaches to Mauricio Pochettino, who's just every team he's coached has improved, other than maybe PSG, and Emma Hayes, who is arguably the best coach in all of women's soccer. Yeah, it's the commercial revenue is great, but also, like, for all the issues and inefficiencies about US soccer, to land on those two coaches, you really can't ask for much more than that.
Stevie's got the players. We've seen that. They're talented. They play at the top level across Europe and the world. So what's gone wrong, and how can he fix that? Because they've only won once. That was against Bolivia since March. Is it simply a case of coming in with what he's got on his CV, Pochettino, and things will happen? Or is it not as simple as that?
No, it's basics, but and as easy as that sounds, it's clearly not easy to put a team together and put the jigsaw together. Straight away he's got to get them on the toes. That this last cycle seems as though they were all just relaxed too much. Everything was too easy. He in my opinion will get them on their toes every time. I always say it. All the best teams, when the manager walks in the room, or the manager walks on the field, or wherever it is, if you notice, everybody sort of stands to attention a little bit, but he has them on their toes. So that's just because of his reputation. I believe that'll happen, and then he'll hold them to a standard. But then the most important thing is, how does he put the pieces of the puzzle together in order to make them a fluid, solid, number one, attacking team that can take on anybody and compete? Because right now they can beat the also-rans. Well, I shouldn't say that. They drew one each with New Zealand. But generally they can beat the also-rans. When it comes to playing the so-called bigger and better teams, they're just way short. And probably half of it's confidence as well, because they know they're way short. So these are all the things that Pochettino has given to all the teams that he's been in, pretty much. Certainly Espanyol when he started, no question Southampton, and absolutely with Tottenham. I mean, he took them to a Champions League final. So, yeah, this guy will get them on their toes, but it's how he puts the pieces together that will determine whether they can compete in a World Cup against the best sides. That's always going to be the tough part for a coach. Which pieces fit the best way in order to make us better?
Mark, final point on Pochettino. It's Panama first up in October in Austin. Then he's got a friendly in Mexico. How much time do you think it'll take him just to get used to the fact it's not really a day-to-day industry and business being a national team coach? He's going to be based in Georgia. He's going to fly a lot to Europe to watch his players there. But it's not seeing your players on the training ground every single day. It's seeing them, getting them for 4 or 5 days or a couple of weeks, and then not seeing them again for a few months. How do you think you'll cope with that?
Well, I mean, he has had kind of lengthy periods at work over the last 2 or 3 years, so it won't be completely alien to him. But I do think he'll enjoy being on the training pitch. And, with the MLS season being out of kilter with the European season, he might get time outside the traditional windows to work with these players. So he might find a way around it. I'm sure the USSF are going to use him quite a lot in terms of coaching the kids, the younger players. So I don't think he'll have a lot of time on his hands. But, he'll always have to get back to Europe as well. He'll have to scout a lot of players in the European game. So I don't think he'll be sat on his hands very often, but he'll be desperate to get on the training field when he has that game against Panama and then Mexico. And, Mexico, I know they're in a bit of a mess right now. They're probably in a worse state than the US, but a US-Mexico game, no matter where it is a real test of both sides. So I think he'll relish the fact that he's got such a big game early on to test the mental strength of his players. Do they have the kind of that kind of resolve to match their ability? And Mexico away is a good early sighter for him to say, are you guys what I need, or do I need to look at other players?